Janet Ainsworth is a prominent legal scholar, known as the John D. Eshelman Professor of Law Emerita at Seattle University School of Law and a research professor in the Research Center for Legal Translation, China University of Political Science and Law in Beijing. Her research focuses on the intersection of law, language, and culture, and she has authored numerous articles and books on these subjects. A significant area of her work critiques the application of American constitutional law concerning police interrogations and confessions, specifically the restrictive interpretations of Miranda rights assertions due to what she describes as a linguistic ideology that privileges hyperliteral language, often making constitutional protections practically unattainable by arrestees. Additionally, she is known for her influential scholarship on juvenile justice, notably arguing for the abolition of the separate juvenile court system. Reimagining Childhood and Reconstructing the Legal Order, The Case for Abolishing the Juvenile Court 1990, Ainsworth argues that abolishing the juvenile court is essential to reimagining childhood and reconstructing a more equitable legal order. Interpreting Sacred Texts, Preliminary Reflections on Constitutional Discourse in China 1991, Ainsworth offers preliminary reflections on interpreting sacred texts within the context of constitutional discourse in China. Speaking of Rights 1992, Ainsworth examines the phrase speaking of rights as a foundational element in legal and linguistic rights discourse. In a different register, The Pragmatics of Powerlessness in Police Interrogation 1993, Ainsworth analyzes the pragmatics of powerlessness during police interrogation, highlighting linguistic imbalances. Youth Justice in a Unified Court, Response to Critics of Juvenile Court Abolition 1994, Ainsworth defends the unification of youth justice within a single court system in response to critics of juvenile court abolition. Gail Steigel 1994 Trial Language, Differential Discourse Processing and Discursive Formation 1995, Ainsworth reviews Gail Steigel's trial language, praising its exploration of differential discourse processing in legal settings. Categories and Culture, On the Rectification of Names in Comparative Law 1996, Ainsworth explores how categories and culture influence the rectification of names in comparative law. The Court's Effectiveness in Protecting the Rights of Juveniles in Delinquency Cases 1996, Ainsworth assesses the juvenile court's effectiveness in protecting the rights of young people in delinquency cases. Law in Case Books, Law School in Action, The Case for Casebook Reviews 1996, Ainsworth advocates for systematic casebook reviews to bridge the gap between law in books and law in action. On Seeing Chinese Law from the Chinese Point of View, An Appreciative Look at the Scholarly Career of Professor William Jones 1996, Ainsworth honors Professor William Jones by examining Chinese law from an authentically Chinese perspective. Journal Issue, The Juvenile Court Volume 6 No. 3 Winter 1996-1996, Ainsworth edits and contributes to a special journal issue dedicated to the future of the juvenile court. Balancing Juvenile Justice 1997, Ainsworth critiques Balancing Juvenile Justice by Guarino Ghezzi and Loughran for its policy implications. Achieving the Promise of Justice for Juveniles, A Call for the Abolition of Juvenile Court 1997, Ainsworth calls for abolishing the juvenile court to truly achieve justice for young offenders. On Academic Discrimination 2004, Ainsworth exposes the subtle mechanisms of academic discrimination within legal education. Linguistics as a Knowledge Domain in the Law 2005, Ainsworth establishes linguistics as a critical knowledge domain within legal theory and practice. Curses, Swearing, and Obscene Language in Police Suspect Interactions, Why Lawyers and Judges Should Care 2007, Ainsworth warns that curses and swearing in police interactions undermine legal fairness and should concern lawyers and judges. Linguistic Ignorance or Linguistic Ideology Socio-Linguistic and Pragmatic Issues in Police Interrogation Rules 2007, Ainsworth contrasts linguistic ignorance with ideological bias in shaping police interrogation rules. You have the right to remain silent. But only if you ask for it. Just so, the role of linguistic ideology in American police interrogation law 2008, Ainsworth reveals how linguistic ideology restricts the exercise of Miranda rights in American police interrogation. Linguistic features of police culture and the coercive impact of police officers swearing in police-citizen street interactions 2008, Ainsworth documents how police swearing reinforces coercive power dynamics in street-level interactions. Asking jurors to do the impossible, a response to Peter Tyersma 2009, Ainsworth argues that jurors are often asked to perform impossible interpretive tasks, responding to Peter Tyersma. Coercion and Confessions 2010, Ainsworth examines how coercion undermines the reliability of confessions in forensic contexts. Language, Power, and Identity in the Workplace, Enforcement of English-Only Rules by Employers 2010, Ainsworth critiques workplace English-only rules as tools of linguistic and identity-based control. Linguistic Ideology in the Workplace, The Legal Treatment in American Courts of Employers' English-Only Policies 2010, Ainsworth reframes employer English-only policies as expressions of linguistic ideology in court. A Lawyer's Perspective, Ethical, Technical, and Practical Considerations in the Use of Linguistic Expert Witnesses 2010, Ainsworth outlines ethical and practical challenges in using linguistic experts in court. Coerced Confessions, The Discourse of Bilingual Police Interrogations 2011, Ainsworth analyzes how bilingual police interrogations lead to coerced confessions through discourse. Legal Creation of Liability 2011, Ainsworth explores how evidence rules construct legal liability through speech and silence. Book Review, Susan Burke-Seligson, Coerced Confessions, The Discourse of Bilingual Police Interrogations 2011, Ainsworth reviews Susan Burke-Seligson's Coerced Confessions for its insights into bilingual interrogation discourse. Reflections on My Colleague, Tom Holditch 2012, Ainsworth reflects on the career and contributions of colleague Tom Holditch. The Meaning of Silence in the Right to Remain Silent 2012, Ainsworth delves into the complex legal meaning of silence under the right to remain silent. The Performance of Gender as Reflected in American Evidence Rules 2012, Ainsworth examines how American evidence rules perform and reinforce gender norms. Roger W. Shuey, The Language of Defamation Cases 2012, Ainsworth reviews Roger Shuey's The Language of Defamation Cases for its linguistic precision. What's Wrong with Pink Pearls and Cornrow Braids, Employee Dress Codes and the Semiotic Performance of Race and Gender in the Workplace 2013, Ainsworth critiques workplace dress codes as semiotic performances of race and gender. Silence, Speech, and the Paradox of the Right to Remain Silent in American Police Interrogation 2013, Ainsworth explores the paradox of silence and speech within the right to remain silent during interrogation. Why do innocent people confess to crimes they did not commit? A consideration of the linguistic and psychological characteristics of false confessions and forensic linguistic. 2013, Ainsworth investigates why innocent people confess, linking linguistics and psychology in false confessions. Law and Language, Current Legal Issues 2011-2013, Ainsworth contributes to a volume on current legal issues in law and language from 2011. Legal Discourse and Legal Narratives, Adversarial versus Inquisitorial Models 2015, Ainsworth contrasts adversarial and inquisitorial models through their legal discourse and narratives. Speaking of Language and Law, Conversations on the Work of Peter Tyersma 2015, Ainsworth co-edits Conversations honoring the linguistic legacy of Peter Tyersma. How We Play Games with Words in the Law 2015, Ainsworth illustrates how legal language functions like strategic word games. Sex, Culpability, and the Defense of Provocation 2015, Ainsworth reviews Danielle Tyson's work on provocation and culpability in gendered legal defenses. Sex, Culpability, and the Defense of Provocation, Danielle Tyson 2013-2015, Ainsworth critiques the legal treatment of sexual misconduct through Roger Shuey's linguistic lens. Lost in Translation, Linguistic Diversity and the Elusive Quest for Plain Meaning in the Law 2016, Ainsworth warns that legal plain meaning is elusive amid linguistic diversity in translation. Discursive Constructions of Consent in the Legal Process 2016, Ainsworth co-edits a volume on how consent is discursively constructed in legal processes. Totality of Circumstances and Translating the Miranda Warnings 2016, Berkseligson, via Ainsworth's volume, examines Miranda warnings under totality of circumstances translation challenges. Negotiating the Right to Remain Silent in Inquisitorial Trials 2016, Vander Hooven et al. Explore negotiating silence rights in inquisitorial trial systems. Promoting Litigant Consent to Arbitration in Multilingual Small Claims Court 2016, Andremeyer et al. Study Promoting Arbitration Consent in Multilingual Small Claims Courts. Culture, Cursing, and Coercion 2016, Ainsworth analyzes how cursing constructs coercive consent in legal interactions. The construction of admissions of fault through American rules of evidence, speech, silence, and significance in the legal creation of liability 2016, Ainsworth shows how evidence rules turn speech, silence, and inference into admissions of fault. Fault through American rules of 2016, Ainsworth contributes to exploring fault construction via American evidence rules. Communication in Investigative and Legal Contexts 2016, Ainsworth reviews integrated forensic approaches in investigative and legal communication. Aga, Asif, and Frog 2015. Registers of Communication 2016, Ainsworth reviews a work on registers of communication across disciplines. ISBN 9780199601530. Jones, Stephen, M. Lynn Murphy, Carita Paradis and Caroline Wilnes Antonyms in English 2016, Ainsworth reviews a linguistic study on antonyms and construals in English. Discursive Constructions of Consent in the Legal Process 2016, Ehrlich, Eads, and Ainsworth reframe consent as a discursive legal construct. Procedural Justice and the Discursive Construction of Narratives at Trial, Global Perspectives 2017, Ainsworth examines procedural justice through global narrative construction at trial. Will the haves come out ahead of the have-nots in international arbitration? The Structural Dynamics of Justice in Chinese African Commercial Arbitration Disputes 2017, Ainsworth questions whether structural biases favor the powerful in Chinese African arbitration. 3. Will the haves come out ahead of the have-nots in international arbitration 2017, Ainsworth previews structural justice dynamics in international arbitration disparities. Why Paul Grice probably couldn't exercise his Miranda rights 2017, Ainsworth humorously argues Paul Grice would fail to properly invoke his Miranda rights. Linguiculture Mediazione Languages Cultures Mediation 2017, Ainsworth contributes to a journal on languages, cultures, and mediation. Abo, Julie, and Fabienne Bader eds 2017, Gender, Language, and the Periphery 2017, Ehrlich, Eads, and Ainsworth review gender and language from societal margins. Journal of Legal Discourse 2017, Ainsworth joins an editorial board for a journal on legal discourse. Who wrote this? Modern Forensic Authorship Analysis as a Model for Valid Forensic Science 2018, Ainsworth and Juula propose forensic authorship analysis as a model for valid forensic science. 11 Law and the Grammar of Judgment 2018, Ainsworth explores the grammar of legal judgment and its linguistic underpinnings. Chapter 2 Anatomy of a False Confession, The Linguistic and Psychological Characteristics of False Confessions Janet Ainsworth 2019, Ainsworth anatomizes the linguistic and psychological markers of false confessions. In memory of Professor James E. Bond 2019, Ainsworth memorializes Professor James E. Bond's contributions to legal scholarship. When police discursive violence interacts with intimate partner violence, domestic violence as a risk factor for police-induced false confessions 2020, Ainsworth links domestic violence to heightened risk of police-induced false confessions. How I Got Started 2020, Ainsworth reflects on her entry into forensic linguistics. Miranda writes, Curtailing Coercion in Police Interrogation, The Failed Promise of Miranda v. Arizona 2020, Ainsworth critiques Miranda's failure to curb coercion in police interrogation. Serving Science and Serving Justice, Ethical Issues Faced by Forensic Linguists in Their Role as Expert Witnesses 2022, Ainsworth examines ethical tensions for forensic linguists serving science and justice. When Police Discursive Violence Interacts with Intimate Partner Violence 2022, Ainsworth studies intersections of police discursive violence and intimate partner violence. Journal of Legal Discourse 2023, Ainsworth co-edits a journal issue on legal discourse. Journal of Legal Discourse 2024, Ainsworth co-edits another volume of the Journal of Legal Discourse. Not fully cited, 27 Will the haves come out ahead of the have-nots in international arbitration? The structural dynamics of justice in Chinese-African commercial arbitration disputes. Aston Institute for Forensic Linguistics Past Events. Coerced or compelled speech concerning, 113 crisis clinics, 113 feminist scholarship, 113 First Amendment protections, 113 African Americans. Uman, J. Ainsworth, J. Alcala, L. Alexander, M. Alexander, S. J. Alito, you have the right to remain silent, but only if you ask for it. Just so, the role of linguistic ideology in American police. Of employers' English-only policies. Procedural justice in the transition from inquisitorial to adversarial justice models.